Hello and welcome to Ecoholics. A very good evening to all of you. So today we'll discuss about the India's economic growth since independence, since 1947. So here in this lecture, if you have read 11th class NCRT, which is very basic for any examination which you want to actually appear or want to qualify, 11th class NCRT, Indian economic development, is very vital. Now, on the basis of this NCERT, I would connect some of the dots starting from the right after independence to, we can say, the 2019 and later on with 2024-25, where we have the target of $5 trillion economy. Now, if you see the growth path of India, so economic growth path that actually very vital for the economic development, and in order to become a developed country, India need to think in certain direction that how we can achieve this growth converted into the development. Now, first of all, the target is $5 trillion economy. So again, we keep in mind this target and we'll analyze the policies which India have taken since 1947. Now, you know that recently China. So I start my journey with China. China से हम शुरू करेंगे. So China just celebrated their 70th anniversary of communist revolution, which is communist took over at that particular time in the year 1949, which is popularly known as the Cultural Revolution. Now, if we see the average growth rate of China from 1952 to 2018, it comes around on an average per annum. It comes around 8.1%. Very important. Listen very carefully in order to compare India and China economically. Now, this comes to an increase, we can say increase of about 54 times. So 54 times increase in the real value terms since, we can say, 1952. Now, China's income obviously didn't grow 8% throughout this particular period, but we can say if we compare with India, for the first 25 years, for the first 25 years of both India as well as China, both countries grew at a relatively same growth rate. Now, India and China was also having the same per capita income. Now, it means from 1950 to 1975, India and China, we can say, was at equal position. So here we can say that in order to understand this, we need to switch back towards Chinese economy. Now again, what happened in China in the year 1978, Chinese president, popularly known as the Deng Xiaoping. So Deng Xiaoping, the president of China in 1978, he adopted the open door policy. तो इन्होंने ओपन डोर पॉलिसी अडॉप्ट की थी. ओपन डोर पॉलिसी आप समझ सकते हैं सेम एज 1991 इंडिया ने एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स लाया था, लिबरलाइजेशन, प्राइवेटाइजेशन एंड ग्लोबलाइजेशन. सो इट्स लाइक सेम एज इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स. सो इन 1978 Deng Xiaoping adopted open door policy in China. Now, what happened in that particular open door policy? That actually reversed the economic policy of the Mao's era. So Mao Zedong, so Deng Xiaoping, reversed all the economic policy of Mao's era, because under Mao's era, that Chinese economy crashed a lot of times and it cost around for 50 million lives in China by then. Now, this China growth happened only in the last 20 to 25 years. So this was, we can say, a new China after 1978, where we can say the compounded annual growth rate CAGR was around 16%. Now coming on to India, what India did. Now if we talk about India, over the last 70 years, if we take starting from, we can say, 1950, and we are approaching the 2020. Now over the last 70 years, the India increased the income by 28 times, almost half of the China. For the first 30 years, that is from 1950 to 1980, India grew about 3% annually. So India की जो growth rate थी वो 3% annually थी. Then growth stepped up and up to, we can say, 5% in, we can say, the next 22 years. So we can understand that next 22 years, so that is from 1980 to, we can say, 2002. And for the last 15 years, that is the latest 15 years, from 2003 to 2018, India grew up to 7.7%. So it means that India is achieving the increasing growth rate in terms of the GDP figures. Now if you see the India's experience in terms of three phases that I discussed. In the first phase, this is the from 1950 to 1980, the situation was very dismal. हालत खराब थी. Now India pursued the import substitution policy. Import substitution policy. What does it mean? It means whatever we are importing, we can substitute with the domestic production. So suppose we are importing coal, so India can mine coal. If suppose we are importing wheat, so India should produce wheat. So that is what we call the import substitution policy. Now this policy, although not very bad, but that affected India's foreign trade. Because whatever India is actually producing, they're not exporting. Why they were not exporting? Because of the large domestic market as well as the domestic consumption. So they were not thinking about producing surplus and exporting these things. So that hurt the industrial sector, especially, we can say, the cotton textile. So cotton textile at that particular time had a huge advantage, and they might be increased a lot of exports during this particular first phase, that is from 1950 to 1980. And at that particular time, industrialization was the capital intensive. So that particular time, the industrialization was also capital intensive, because in the year 1956, when we adopted the second industrial policy resolution, that was based on the basic and heavy capital goods industry based on the Mahalanobis model. Now at that particular point in the first phase, agriculture was neglected. Now why agriculture was neglected? Because policymakers were thinking that under agriculture there's a problem of redistribution. So what they were thinking about, that the main problem is about the redistribution of output. So they were actually blindfold, and they were not saying that the problem is from the growth and productivity side. What they were thinking, that problem is from the redistribution side, redistribution of the output, that is from landlord to tenant, but not on the growth and the productivity. So that was a big fault of the policymakers. Now here we can say it created a disaster, and we struggled in agriculture sector as well. Now this affected the agriculture sector policy, especially in the long run. So in the long run, there must be certain secular effects, that too many people today living around the agricultural sector. So under agriculture sector, 49% of the population engaged in agriculture sector, where the contribution is only 14%, that is 1/4 contribution towards the GDP. And among these under agriculture, 2/3 of the farmers are actually living their life at subsistence level. What does it mean? It means they are just hand to mouth, they are feeding themselves only, they are not creating any income. Now in this particular scenario, if we say that agriculture has not even grown 5% for on an average, we can say, for the period of 5 years. So we are not having any evidence that agriculture grew at a 5 years on a trot, we can say, continuously or at a particular stretch. So we have not any evidences that agriculture grew consecutively for the 5 years. That is not, we can say, any evidences from the Indian economy. Now we say that a lot of policymakers are saying that the agriculture is the main problem, the farmer is the main problem. That's why India's growth is so low. India cannot grow. So what is the main, we can say, take out from this particular statement of the policymakers, that what we need is, we need to help these farmers, that they come out from the agriculture sector to non-agriculture sector. So it means we need to shift this 49% of the population dependent on agriculture to, we can say, towards non-agriculture sector, because the contribution is pretty less. Contribution to GDP is 14%. If you say United States of America, the contribution of agriculture towards GDP is 4%, and the population engaged of the total United States in agriculture is 2%. It means 2% of the population producing 4% of their GDP contribution. But in India, if you see, the 14% contribution to GDP produced by the 49% of the people engaged in agriculture sector. So the main question is that they can afford a better livelihood. And for the subsistence level of the farmers, they are already rely on non-agriculture activity, because if we are having subsistence level of farmers, जो फार्मर जो सिर्फ हैंड टू माउथ रहते हैं, जिनके पास पैसा नहीं है, उनको सबसिस्टेंस लेवल फार्मर्स कहते हैं, जो सिर्फ क्रॉप उगाते हैं और सिर्फ कंजम्पशन के लिए. नाउ प्रधानमंत्री किसान सम्मान निधि, तो ये आपने स्कीम सुनी होगी, प्रधानमंत्री किसान सम्मान निधि, जो स्कीम दिसंबर में अनाउंस की गई थी और इंटरिम बजट के जस्ट पहले अनाउंस की गई थी. उसमें फार्मर्स को दिया गया है 6,000 रुपये, ईयरली 6,000 रुपीज़ they will get. Now from this 6,000, what's the best thing? That center should be given this particular substantial sum, that those farmers who leave, or who are ready to leave the farming activity. So give these kind of incentives for the people so that they will leave the agriculture towards the non-agriculture sector. Now why I am saying this, I'll explain in a minute. If we come on to the next phase, that is from 1981 to 2003. Now this period, actually economy crashed at the initial stages. Why? Indian economy crashed. And why crashed? Because of the oil shock. So oil shock, and what oil shock actually succeeded by this, Indira Gandhi abandoned the self-sufficiency. So Indira Gandhi actually abandoned the self-sufficiency program or self-dependency, self-reliance program, and she took a large loan from International Monetary Fund in order to develop the Indian economy. Later on, the Rajiv Gandhi, India's Prime Minister, so what Rajiv Gandhi did, he also borrowed money from abroad. Now you can understand that India is borrowing from IMF, India was borrowing from abroad. Abroad especially, we can say NRI deposits. So from non-resident Indians, they were borrowing the money. And he liberalized the India's imports as well. Liberalization of imports means cutting down the import duty. But what happened? As he liberalized the imports, although he didn't took the reforms, he didn't take any reforms. So what happened to the industrial economy that were expecting to increase exports? But what happened in the year 1991, due to some external crisis as well as high amount of debt, both national as well as international, Economy crashed again. So economic crisis. Another economic crisis. What happened? Another loan that Indian economy had to take. That is emergency loan. Now what happened? As India had to borrow again from abroad in order to grow. So it was a notion that whenever India want to actually grow as fast as possible, then it has to borrow money from abroad. But what happened in 1991? Government took reforms of LPG, especially the Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. So P.V. Narasimha Rao liberalized the economy by cutting down the tariffs, the quotas, and the growth rate increased to 5% for the very first time on a continuous basis, comparison to the 3% in the previous period. Although it was still inadequate for the size of the India. But later on, what happened in the years before 2003, the Vajpayee government in their last 5 years, we can say from 1998 to 2003, they began to free the government policy. So he tried to liberalize the economy by the process of divestment. So the same term for disinvestment. Although government was doing these kind of selling their estate ownership, not due to, we can say, due to planning, due to compulsion, they were doing these kind of things. Although again we can say that the first generation of economic planners neglected the effect of import substitution on the Indian economy. Neglect of agriculture, etc., neglect of self-sufficiency, etc. Now these kind of things were abundant during this period 1998 to 2003. What happened after that? India experienced large amount of inflows. Just we can say start of this 21st century. International trade and capital movements started pouring a lot of capital into India. Now the next stage and the third stage, that is from 2003 to 2018. So latest stage. Now under this stage, India was very lucky. Why? Because in the initial phase of 2003 to 2008, there was a boom in the world market. So India prepared itself to thrive, one of the open economy in the world. And what happened, luckily for India, there was a boom, as I said earlier. So that's why India avoided certain crises as a severe depression. But the question arises, what will happen after 2019? So this is how we can connect. Now the first step is to have ambitious program. The first step we need that there must be some ambitious program to transfer farmers out of farming. This is the first step we need to think, especially to other jobs. Now the government could make it conditional, like condition of the debt cancellation, or the debtor farmer would quit the agriculture. Like this, they can do these kind of things. If you take a lot of debt, you have to quit the farming. So these kind of things that government can actually make certain policy. Now the second thing that government can do is to abandon to state ownership of the public sector enterprises or public sector undertakings. Now it was always economically, we can say, a fault in the economic policy that there's a big waste of scarce resources that goes to the loss making PSUs. So we need to think that these are scarce resources, they are taxpayers' money, so we cannot give just to bail out these loss-making public sector undertakings. These are the biggest waste of resources desperately whenever India is certainly a lot of people living under the poverty. A lot of people are poor, as well as they are not able to afford their normal meal. So you can see in the latest global hunger index as well. So we can understand that these kind of things will help to achieve equitable growth rate. Now here we can say in the last 2014 to 2019 period, there were a lot of good initiatives like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, the Ayushman Bharat Abhiyan. These kind of programs will create informal sector jobs. Swachh Bharat is contributory towards the health as well as the Ayushman Bharat. The electrification of the villages will also provide the economic activity in the rural areas. So these kind of pension scheme etc. that work for the informal sector workers, farmers as well as elderly. So you can say, although the main question is whether we'll be able to achieve the $5 trillion economy by the year 2024-25, which we can say is a big question. India may or may not achieve, but what matters is that 2019 must be better than 2018. 2020 must be better than 2019. So this is my approach. This is what I wanted to say by this message, that every year should be better than the previous year. This is what we call the growth. So we are not thinking about comparing anything. The main competition is of India is with India of yesterday. So that's what this lecture is all about. If you have any doubt, any query, anything you want to say, you can mention in the comment box. Okay, Prakashi, I didn't aware about this. And the next question is from which sector provide maximum GDP for India? That is service sector. So services like banking services, the financial services, public administration, etc., that provides 60% plus contribution to India's GDP currently. What is sustainable development? Sustainable development is like the development of 2019 will not affect the development of the further years. It means we cannot go for exploitation of all the resources or use of all the resources in 2019. So sustainably we have to use throughout the future years. So this is what we call sustainable development. Like suppose if you have 10 liters of water for a day, obviously you will use sustainably. It means in the morning you will not drink 6 liters of water, because the remaining whole day you have to take care of this 4 liter of waters. So this is how we can say example of sustainable development. So that's it for today, and if you have any doubt, most welcome. Otherwise, this session is on a daily basis from 10:30 p.m. live on YouTube channel of Ecoholics. So don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon so that you'll get the notification. Apart from this, we are meeting from Monday to Saturday. It means tomorrow is Sunday, so we are not meeting tomorrow. And so we'll see you on Monday at 10:30 p.m. with another new topic of current economic discussion as well as analysis. Apart from this, do follow Ecoholics on other social media platforms like Facebook group, like on Instagram, as well as if you have any doubt, any query, personal thing, if you want, you can write on my WhatsApp number. As well as for the full courses, you can visit our website, that is ecoholics.in. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you for following Ecoholics. So that's it. Bye bye. Good night.